All right, here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at her new role. Then, her pretty unique path from Lagos to London. We'll trace that rapid rise to power, and then we'll really get into her brand of conservatism. After that, we'll look at the huge challenge of leading a divided party, and finally, we'll ask, what's next?
All right, let's start at the beginning. You see, Kemi Badenoch's story is, well, it's not your typical political backstory. It doesn't start in the usual corridors of British power. Nope, it starts thousands of miles away.
Okay, this is where her story gets really interesting because it's full of contrasts. She was actually born in London to Nigerian parents, but she grew up in Lagos. And she's described her background as middle class, but that's in a Nigerian context. What did that mean for her? Well, in her own words, sometimes having no running water or electricity and even going through periods of poverty. Then, at just 16, she comes back to the UK, all on her own. And get this, her first career wasn't even in politics. It was in software engineering and then finance, working for the very exclusive private bank, Coutts. Quite a journey, right?
So, from finance to politics. And when she made that jump, wow. Her rise was, and I mean this, incredibly fast.
And this timeline just lays it all out. I mean, look at the speed here. In 2015, she's in local London politics. Just 2 years later, 2017, she's a member of parliament. By 2022, she's in the cabinet. And then, bam, 2024, she's the leader of the whole party. Think about that, from City Hall to leader of the opposition in less than 10 years. In the world of British politics, that is just an astonishingly fast climb.
Okay, so we've seen how she got there. But now for the big one. What does Kemi Badenoch actually believe? This is where she really carves out her own space. She's a very distinct and, yeah, often controversial figure, especially for that wing of her party that feels like their traditional values are being threatened.
And this quote, this is a perfect example of her style. This was from a leaked message where she said, "I don't care about colonialism because I know what we were doing before colonialism got there." Now, what's she getting at here? Her point seems to be that pre-colonial Africa wasn't some perfect paradise, and that Europeans just sort of changed who was in charge. It's a really bold statement, and it shows she's not afraid to break from the usual conservative lines on the British Empire, while also pushing back on liberal critiques from her own very unique perspective. And that perspective, that directness, it extends right into what people call the culture wars. She's been a very loud opponent of teaching concepts like white privilege or critical race theory as if they're settled facts in schools. She argues that identity politics just shuts down any real debate. And she's hit back hard at critics, saying it's just wrong to use racial slurs against ethnic minorities simply because they, in her words, dare to think differently. Her views on transgender rights have also become a huge part of her political identity. When she was a minister, for instance, she opposed plans that would let employees self-identify their gender at work. She's also consistently argued for keeping single-sex spaces for women, like toilets and in sports. It's also been reported that while she was Equalities Minister, she met with groups that have been described as anti-transgender, but didn't meet with major LGBTQ+ rights organizations.
So, becoming leader is one thing, but inheriting a party that's, well, facing a total existential crisis? That's another thing entirely. The party she's now leading is deeply, deeply divided and struggling to win votes.
And you really can't overstate the scale of the challenge she walked into. Just look at the local elections back in May 2025. They were an absolute disaster for the party. They lost something like 2/3 of the council seats they were defending. And even Badenoch herself didn't try to sugarcoat it, calling results like that a bloodbath.
Yeah, and a huge piece of that challenge is coming from the political right. She's been dealing with a constant stream of defections to the rival Reform UK party. We're talking MPs, councillors, even former big names from the cabinet. And then came the really dramatic part. She sacked her main leadership rival, Robert Jennick, from her shadow cabinet. The shadow cabinet, that's the opposition's top team. Why? She said she had irrefutable evidence he was planning to defect in a way that was designed to be as damaging as possible. I mean, talk about high-stakes political drama.
So, okay, you've got this backdrop of strong convictions on one side and total party chaos on the other. So where does she go from here? What is her vision for the future? Where is she trying to take the Conservative Party?
Well, she's already laid out some pretty clear and pretty hardline policy directions. She's promised a strict numerical cap on immigration, and here's a big one. She's announced that a future Conservative government under her would actually leave the European Convention on Human Rights. That would be a fundamental shift in the UK's relationship with international law. And at the heart of her message is this idea of telling the truth. She's openly admitted that past Tory governments basically failed on their big promises, especially on Brexit and immigration.
And that brings us to the final question, really. Kemi Badenoch is, without a doubt, a conviction politician. She has a vision that's clear, it's uncompromising, and it's often very polarizing. But she's leading a party that's in a deep, deep crisis, searching for a reason to exist, searching for unity. So the question, and it's a huge one that's going to define the next chapter of British politics, is this. Can she take that vision and actually redefine what it even means to be a conservative for this new, very uncertain era?